we really, really are at this moment in American history where we should be doing everything we can to inspire confidence. And I think you get that through transparency and accountability and laws that secure voting while also guaranteeing access to everyone that wants to participate.
Welcome back to The Narrative. CCV President Aaron Bear, Policy Director David Mahan. Our buddy Mike Andrews is not with us today. This is the Narrative Classic. If you might remember that, we might be dating some of our. Claire probably doesn't get that reference. Our producer Claire. But going back to the old days of the Narrative when it was when David and I running the show here. Miss our buddy Mike, but we'll power through without him. But we want to dive in. We got a great discussion today. We actually just recorded our conversation with Jason Snead from the Honest Elections Project. Honestly, that I feel like that conversation could have gone for another hour, just talking about everything going on with elections in America today. But this was an opening salvo of a conversation that we're probably going to keep going about what's going on with elections in Ohio. And we really dove into the foreign money bill that the governor just signed, the ban on foreign money contributions that the governor just signed. So make sure you stick around for that. But this was a busy CCV policy week, which again, man, David, I feel like I'm just out of the loop. Like I still have my lobbyist ID, but I'm not even down there anymore. You're the one carrying all the heavy work around here now. I just get to put my feet up.
DJ the Rooster misses you, man.
I
He
know,
stops
right?
me every day over there asking where you are.
He just has that longing look in his face, and he's trying to. That's one of our favorite liberal bloggers that loves to follow me around the state house. He's a big fan of the Narrative, I'm sure. But we did have a big hearing this week on a bill that we've talked a little bit about here, but it hadn't really been moving much lately. And we had proponent testimony for it, a bill sponsored by Representative Angie King, House Bill 245, which a lot of times we'll call the adult cabaret bill. The media calls it a drag show ban. David, what is this bill? What does it actually do? And let's talk a little bit about what happened this week in the hearing.
Really simple bill. I mean, it basically just says that it bans adult cabaret performances in spaces other than adult cabarets. I mean, it's really cut and dry. It doesn't ban strip clubs. It doesn't ban drag shows. It's really just focusing on the worst of the worst offenders that want to take their show on the road and pander their, lewd and obscene performances in front of children in public. That's really all it does. It received sponsored testimony not too long ago, and we did just this week. And we testified, had a proponent hearing where we were limited just to a handful of people. But I think it went really well for us. There was one member on the Democrat side that was really just trying to obfuscate everything and shift the attention off of what we were really talking about, which is protecting kids. And I think he exposed himself on that pretty bad. But for the most part, the entire committee.
You have to be careful. He exposed himself rhetorically there, right? I mean, where we're talking.
That is important.
With these things we're talking about and the things that are actually being exposed to children, we need to be very clear. What he exposed.
It was gross, but not in that way.
And Dave, I mean, again, like this is one of these things when you said they're taking their shows on the road, these adult cabaret, these drag shows, things like that, they're taking them to parks. They're taking them to children's libraries. And we had situations happening here in Ohio, and some of those folks showed up to testify. Can you maybe share some of the stories of adult, primarily men, dressing up as prostitutes, as women, as women prostitutes, and making a show and striptease in front of kids?
That's right. The impetus of the bill was Representative Angie King from Mercer County, Salina, Ohio. They, since 2022, have had drag shows in their splash park, which is, obviously a space for children. It's also right next to the kids' playground there in Mercer County.
Real quick, I want to put a pin in that right there. I want to mark that. Mercer County, right? This isn't Cuyahoga County, right? This isn't Franklin County, which again would still be bad. But this is Mercer County, one of the reddest counties in the entire country this is happening in.
That's right. And they had, from that community, two fathers. One was also a pastor. One was city councilman, city council president. And they were just expressing the fact that, they've been reporting this stuff. Their law enforcement won't do anything, some because of fear that even though, this community is not a protected class, they seem to be getting on a local level certain protections that allow them to conduct themselves in this obscene way. And it was interesting in all the news coverage that I've seen. I've not seen any of their testimonies, talked about in the news.
Yeah, and there's just one thing you also said there I really want to zero in on, and I can just hear Phil Burris, the former president of CCV, jumping out of his seat, because one of the most important aspects about this, we're going to continue to drive this bill through the finish line here, but one of the most important aspects of these bills is local prosecutors, right? And local prosecutors enforcing the law.
Right.
And so that's what we're attempting to do with this bill, and hopefully it will pass. But ultimately, this is where those local elections, your city attorney, your the folks in your town, it's up to them to actually prosecute these things. And I think it's time we really start driving home how important those elections are and that they enforce the law.
Yeah, Representative Cecil Thomas came over from the Senate last year. He asked a couple good questions. He said, "Dave, is it that we're not enforcing these laws, or is that we just need new laws?" And I said yes to both. Like we are not, enforcing certain laws, and two, we do have several loopholes that need to be filled, with legislation to deal with our new reality that we live in here in the state of Ohio and across the country.
So, Dave, I want to unpack a little bit more there. We see some media coverage. Again, the headlines on these things tend to be really over the top. But what were some of the highlights to you, or maybe lowlights also from the hearing that stood out again? Why people would oppose a bill that says, "Hey, don't have adults do strip teases in front of kids."
Yeah, well, what they're saying is they're just trying to focus the whole thing on, this is an attack against the LGBT community during Pride Month. And we actually had a proponent testify from Gays Against Groomers. The first person to testify was literally a member of that community, saying that this does not represent our values, that while some of them do enjoy drag shows and things like that, which, I think is gross, within the confines of, a private space where children are not allowed to be there, they said that's fine to them, but outside in public and things like that, it's actually gross, and it's not, a representation of the greater community. And so and again, the media just completely just either ignored that individual's testimony. She got absolutely grilled by Representative Brown on the committee. And the thing was, and I can't break down, as you know, Aaron, all of the details of not just the performances in the communities that were brought up in the hearing, but the products that were sold in broad daylight at a splash park. The twerking and the children putting money into people's underwear. This is insane. And the response of one of the Democrats, he was actually a law enforcement officer, really told the story. Like, are you serious? This is really happening. I actually had Joe Ingles call, did an interview, and I was breaking all this down prior to the hearing. And even she said, "I'm not seeing this." And I asked her, "Why not?" I said, I'm hearing about it all the time. Why are you not seeing it? Because if you're not seeing it, or at least don't want to show it, nobody else sees it either.
Right. And Joey goes with NPR.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. She's seen this mess.
Yeah. And again, it's twofold. And, there's been a lot of, you'll find these memes online of the way these things go, which is the way the media tends to handle these things. And you can think about this through COVID. We were actually just talking about some of this stuff with the COVID vaccines. But the way the media handles these things is at first they say, "Oh, this isn't happening." And then it goes to, "Well, it might be happening, but it's very rare," to, "Yeah, it's happening, but it's not a big deal," to eventually, "Yeah, it's happening and you're wrong for not celebrating it."
That's right.
Right? And we see this loop time and time and time again of what the media tries to do on these things.
Yeah.
And we can't, again, we just have to choose not to play their game, right?
Eyes wide open, family, because on this bill, it's strictly for the worst of the worst. Most drag queen story hour stuff will probably not even be affected by this bill. And I know I have issues with that. Most of you have issues with that. But what this does is allow Ohio to see, where we really are, where we will protect these folks who are out there really trying to expose kids. And I did in my testimony, I talked about where a recent poll from USA Today that 66% of Ohioans oppose any drag performance in front of kids, period, obscene or otherwise. And so that was an actual poll from last fall, even though that's not necessarily the language of this bill.
No, that's right. That's right. I do, want to say though that the other tie into this bill, just for our last little bit of news on the day, is this not because of this bill, but because CCV stood up and said boys shouldn't play in girl sports and we shouldn't sterilize kids for life. CCV is back on the map, and by the map I mean the hate map. The Southern Poverty Law Center has reclassified Center for Christian Virtue as a hate group. I have to confess here, this was maybe one of my in all the success by the grace of God we've been able to have at CCV over the last 7 to 8 years since I came in. Maybe the biggest dig against me was that when I came in and we changed the name from Citizens for Community Values to Center for Christian Virtue, we fell off the hate map. CCV used to be on SPLC's list, and then when Phil retired, Phil was the fighter here. When Phil retired and I came in, for some reason or another, we fell off. The media often accused us of changing our name, so we'd fall off, and that wasn't true at all. We changed it because we wanted to be more true to who we were. But we're back on the hate map. Yeah. So David, I guess I don't know if this means we give you a raise or we cut your pay, because we're back on us.
This is actually where Mike is, family. He's out making shirts and fitted trucker hats and things like that with
hate group certified.
We back on the list, family. No, this is crazy. And actually in the hearing it came up. There was, again, a representative from Gays Against Groomers. They are also on the list. It is interesting, Aaron. There's so many different LGBT either groups or groups that have a lot of LGBT representation, a part of their groups, like Do No Harm, that are all now popping up on this list. And again, I've talked about this being in a tipping point moment in our culture as it relates to some of this indoctrination and ideology. And this is just another example of that.
Yeah, and I think there's a few things in all seriousness that need unpacked on this. I think first and foremost, they're putting groups on this list that they're trying to delegitimize, right? They're trying to undercut your voice in the public square, our voice in the public square. That's why they want now, and the media is very happy to go along with it, and so many folks are able to go along with it, which is to say, well, every time you show up, Center for Christian Virtue, which the Southern Poverty Law Center has designated a hate group, said X, right? That becomes the official describer. And again, a clever tactic by the left to use that to do that. But that's what, that's why these groups that you mentioned, Gays Against Groomers, and groups that undermine the left's predominant narrative show up on this, and groups like us. And the other side of this too is that they list groups like us on the hate group alongside white supremacy groups, right? These tiny little groups that old Klan groups or things like that, or anti-Semitic groups on there, right? Meanwhile, they don't list groups like the Council on Arab-Islamic Relations, which is an overt anti-Semitic organization, right? They don't list a lot of these so-called pro-Palestinian groups that are overtly anti-Semitic on there. It's very strategic what they do, but they try to lump us in together. And I think the other aspect of this that's really important, and I don't think folks should miss out on this, is the reason why CCV popped back up on the list is honestly because of Save Women's Sports, and we said it's wrong for boys to play in girls sports, and it's wrong to sterilize kids. So they're saying this about us, which means they're saying this about you. right? The 70+% of folks that believe in Save Women's Sports and are on the Same on Safe Act, they're saying you are the same as a racist. You are the same as a Klan member. That's who this is. And I think a lot of folks are starting, especially on the right, are recognizing that. I think some in the mainstream are still afraid of it. But this is a bullying tactic, you know?
Yeah, and it's interesting if you do catch some of the news. I know you probably saw it over the last couple of days on the hearing we just talked about. Read the comments, because usually the comments would be, pro this new ideology, this new philosophy. But now it's getting so bad and so crass and so ridiculous that folks on both sides are starting to say, okay, enough's enough. All right, let's move on. This is ridiculous. Yeah. And I'm hoping this Southern Poverty Law Center thing goes the same route.
No, that's right. It's a grift, and I think more and more folks are starting to see that. Well, that's all we got for the news segment today. Please hold on just for a moment. We're gonna have a quick break. Come back with this conversation with Jason. And just a reminder too, if you've enjoyed this podcast, we continue to see more and more listeners. We appreciate everyone who's sharing it. One of the most important things you can do for us to help us reach more folks, now we're the podcast is posted to YouTube as well, is give us a review, especially in the podcast app you use. If you use Apple Podcasts or things like that, those reviews, those ratings, those comments really help us reach more folks. We got some really exciting things coming up. Actually, next week, we're likely going to have Congressman Jim Jordan on to come talk about the Trump verdict and what's happened there and what's going to happen there. We've got some really great guests lined up in the weeks ahead. So we're excited to see this podcast continue to grow and reach more folks, and you can be a big part of helping us reach more parts of the state and the nation. So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back here on The Narrative.
Hey, Narrative listeners. Christians in the marketplace today face more unique and challenging threats than ever before. Businesses are following woke capitalism, chambers of commerce are beholden to social justice, and secular activists are chipping away Christians' First Amendment rights. As Ohio's only Christian chamber of commerce, the Christian Business Partnership stands in the gap to advocate for, to educate, and to celebrate Christian business owners. Joining the partnership also allows businesses to provide their employees with healthcare insurance, workers' compensation, and exclusive banking and educational discounts. To find out more and to join, go to cbpohio.org. That's cbpohio.org.
We have a very special guest on a really important topic that's not just relevant nationally, but also particularly in Ohio, especially with some of the legislation that we were able to just work to get passed here at the State House. We have Jason Snead joining us. Jason is the executive director of the Honest Election Project. Prior to heading the project, Jason spent 10 years at the Heritage Foundation, good friends of CCV, where he had the honor to work for former Attorney General Ed Meese. During his tenure at Heritage, Jason rose to become a senior policy analyst and recognized expert on a wide range of subjects. Jason has managed the development of the Heritage Foundation's election fraud database, a unique tool aggregating proven instances of voter fraud from around the nation. He holds a master's degree from George Mason and a bachelor's degree, from Bowling Green State University. Are you in Ohio, and are you a Buckeye through and through there, Jason?
I am born and raised, yes.
Really? Oh, that's awesome. In Northwest Ohio, or what part?
So I grew up in the Dayton area in Beaver Creek, Ohio. Went to school at Bowling Green. So I'm very very close with the Buckeye State.
That's great. I'll always love having some action in the conversation here at CCV I still say proud Ohio University grad, even though every time I go back to OU and see everything draped in rainbow flags, I get a little frustrated. But Jason, tell us just the listeners about the Honest Elections Project, how it got started, and really why. I think for most folks they can imagine why it got started, but just tell us about the project.
Yeah, so as you said at the top, I spent 10 years at the Heritage Foundation. One of the issues that I worked on while I was there was election integrity. And, it really became clear to me that before you can advance conservative policies and principles in a democracy, you have to get voting right first, right? We have to make sure that we have free and fair elections. That's the foundation of the whole thing. And if we don't have that, then you're not going to ever be successful in winning elections. And we know that the left is sinking enormous resources into trying to change the rules of our democratic republic for their own advantage. So we started Honest Elections Project in 2020 as a discrete organization focused exclusively on that, making sure, as we like to say, that it is easy to vote and hard to cheat, and that our voting system has the sort of safeguards and fair rules that pretty much every American actually wants. It's really only when you talk to the so-called political class that there's any disagreement on some of the basics about how elections should run, right? We should have basic security, voter ID, non-citizens should not be voting, so on and so forth. So the project has been active now for 4 years, and we have focused on making significant improvements to our election system while also holding at bay the persistent attempts by Congress to launch a federal takeover of elections. When Democrats were in charge, they tried over and over and over again for years to do that. But we are focused on a number of issues that sort of run the gamut from making sure that we've got clean voter rolls to basic security, and some of the more interesting stuff like what we just got involved in Ohio, which is this new round of foreign interference in elections, which is coming because even though they decry foreign interference and dark money, the left actually has an enormous amount of so-called dark money, and a lot of it is coming from a particular foreign national, and they're using these funds to influence American politics and even to fund ballot issues, including in states like Ohio.
So before we dive more into the foreign money bill that we just were foreign money ban bill that we just were able to pass here in Ohio, what are some of the biggest ways you see the left trying to manipulate or cheat or get involved in illegally in elections or change the playing field in elections right now? What are some of the biggest tactics they're working on right now?
Well, we always see the left using litigation and lawfare to try to change the rules. So even though they claim to be the party of democracy, they will go into courts, including, unelected federal courts, and they will try to get these judges to rewrite the rules of the elections in whatever manner the left thinks is going to give them the benefit of those changes, right? So they'll go in and they'll get rid of rules against vote harvesting, try to get rid of any kind of voter identification law, prevent states from cleaning up voter rolls, and so forth. That's one big way we see them using and abusing the justice system to actually try to change the rules, skew the playing field, give themselves a tactical advantage. Another thing that we are watching very acutely is the use of the federal government writ large. So there is an executive order that President Biden signed in 2021. It's called Executive Order 14019. It's one of these very kind of like technical sounding names. But what it does is order every federal agency and department that is responsible to the president to use their resources to do a combination of voter registration and get out the vote activities. Now, voter registration may not sound like a terrible thing, right? We want people to have an opportunity to participate. But we have to remember, this is the federal government using your tax dollars to selectively register certain groups of voters that tend to skew left, working with organizations, nonprofits like the ACLU and others that skew left to try to, again, put a thumb on the scale. And when you're talking about get out the vote activities, now you're talking about using your tax dollars to bank votes for an incumbent president, which regardless of what party you are or what party the president is, should not be done. It arguably violates federal law, and at the very least, it violates a norm that we don't want to misuse and abuse the levers of the federal government, the power of the federal government, in order to help incumbents, win elections or determine who the winner is going to be. So those are just a couple of ways that the left is trying to skew the democratic playing field for itself, including some of the new stuff. And then there's stuff that we're going to see, recycled, like what we saw in 2020 with Zuck Bucks, right? When Mark Zuckerberg gave almost $500 million to election offices, and then that was used again for sort of targeted get out the vote activities. Now we've got a new program that's run by the same group that ran that. It's called the U.S. Alliance for Election Excellence. They're going into states and selectively targeting offices, getting into those offices and reshaping them. So now they're trying to actually make the administration of the elections part of the broader left, political apparatus. it's a remarkable set of events that we're dealing with, but it sort of is sort of an all of left approach to skewing elections for their own advantage.
Jason, I got to ask you. My wife and I was trying to torture her the other night by making her watch news before bed, and I came across a video that said, we're talking about voter turnout and suppression, and I actually heard the argument that some state was trying to, enshrine Jim Crow 2.0 by keeping folks from voting. And what they said was that they were denying people food and water, right? And then as they were trying to vote, and somebody actually came on and was like, these are necessities for life. They trying to deny us the necessities of life. So you seem like a nice guy. How would you respond to those kind of accusations?
Well, I have to laugh because the argument about food and water is actually from a Georgia election law change that they made back in 2021. Right. It is a complete lie. And if you actually go in and read the law, it very specifically says that if you are a voter waiting in line, you can get water from an election worker, right? So it's a complete fabrication and a falsehood. And we've been trying to fact check these claims for 3 years, but of course they still get repeated. So my first reaction is to sort of chuckle because despite the claims from a lot of the folks in the media that they're interested in the truth, they keep peddling this lie. And of course, we see that a lot of politicians do as well. But the entire argument about Jim Crow 2.0, what the left tries to do is distract from the fact that their policy prescriptions are actually profoundly unpopular, right? When we talk about how to run an election well, voter identification, clean voter rolls, security for mail ballots, and so forth, those are all things that overwhelmingly, and I'm talking 70, 80, 90% of the public think, yeah, that's actually what we want to see. So the left is always trying to distract from the fact that they're taking a 90-10 issue and they're on the wrong side of it. So they accuse anyone that disagrees with them of racism and voter suppression, hoping that it will prevent a conversation because they don't want to admit how far outside the mainstream that they are. But just to kind of put a couple of basic facts to this point, when Georgia, which was accused of the being the center of the effort to do Jim Crow 2.0, changed its election laws in a way that the left assured us was going to be the end of democracy in Georgia. President Biden went down and gave a fire and brimstone speech in Atlanta. You had the Major League Baseball All-Star game get pulled out of Atlanta in protest, so on and so forth. They came back the next year. They ran a 2022 midterm election, and it had historic levels of turnout. And there was amazing polling that was done after that election that said that literally zero respondents thought it was hard to vote in Georgia. So I usually tell people when they start hearing those sorts of accusations and cries, ignore them. And remember that when you're talking about things like securing our elections, making it easy to vote and hard to cheat, you are reflecting the voice of the people, and they're trying to silence that voice. We all want elections we can trust.
All right. I'll take my post down off of Facebook for Jim Crow 2.0. I'll take it down.
Well, so I want to. This gets to what we just saw happen in Ohio, because again, very similarly, maybe I don't know if I saw a Jim Crow claim, but there were claims of conservatives trying to manipulate elections, trying to suppress voters, trying to suppress messages on this foreign money issue, right? And this was something we experienced very in a very personal way at CCV, being very much involved in the effort to try to protect our Constitution with the 60% ballot initiative, and then obviously very much involved in the abortion amendment. And in both of those cases, we just ran up against a buzzsaw of foreign money from passing through these entities like the 1630 Fund and Arabella Advisors and Hopewell Fund and all of these types of things. And then after the fact, we start seeing, hey, this was actually a lot of this wasn't just not Ohio money, but more so was it American money. So Jason, could you maybe give a perspective on one, this network of groups out there, and who these people are that are funding this in our country today?
Yeah, so we hear a lot conversationally about dark money in American politics, and usually the way that's framed up is that conservative groups are awash in so-called dark money, and that's somehow bad for democracy. Meanwhile, you never hear about the fact that the left actually has way more dark money and is using it to influence American politics all across the country, and a lot of their funding is actually coming from a foreign national. We know this for a fact because we've got all of the IRS documents that show almost $500 million flowing from a Swiss billionaire named Hans-Jörg Wyss into the coffers of various groups that are all under a group called Arabella Advisors. So the groups that you mentioned, Hopewell Fund and 1630, are part of this massive network of left-wing dark money groups that bring in and spend routinely $1 billion or more a year, billion with a B. And they are funding just about every liberal and progressive cause that you can imagine, from litigation to abortion and so forth, including also doing independent expenditures to help advance Joe Biden's agenda, help candidates win elections, and so forth. One of the big things that they have recently really keyed in on are ballot issues. And these are incredibly, incredibly important because, as you all know and have experienced in Ohio firsthand, these are ways that supposedly the citizens of a state are supposed to exercise their role in a direct democracy and give them a say over what laws are going to be in effect and what the Constitution of the state says. So profoundly important elections. The reason that we're so keyed in on this from the foreign national perspective is that there are federal and state laws that say foreign nationals, like Hans-Jörg Wyss, cannot contribute to candidates, right? That's been federal law for half a century at this point.
And state law in Ohio.
And state law in Ohio for a quarter century. But there is no law that says that they cannot give to ballot issues. So as we have seen the left increasingly turn to ballot issue campaigns as a way to push their agenda in states that otherwise are rejecting it and are weaponizing that process, now you've got a loophole that foreign nationals can exploit to have profound impact on elections and on the state of democracy in Ohio and all across the country. And the 1630 Fund is one of the biggest players in this space. They have taken $250 million to date from Hans-Jörg Wyss, that foreign national we talked about, and they have spent $100 million on ballot issue campaigns in 25 states. So this is a massive engine of potential foreign influence directly into elections, all coming from the left.
So again, I think it was like maybe 2 weeks ago, Aaron, I'm sitting in the hearing over in the House, and they're talking about this bill, trying to get it passed. And so the Democrats were just bantering back and forth. But I was really shocked to hear one of them, I guess not too shocked, but literally say that they are trying to stop your ability to put stuff on the ballot. And I was waiting for him to clean that up, and he didn't. And so as we were walking out, before we got to the atrium, Aaron, I went up to another Democrat that was in the committee, and I said, man, can I talk to you real quick? And he said, yeah, man, what's going on, Dave? I said, do you really think that we're trying to stop Black people from putting stuff on the ballot? And he just giggled like you just did, Aaron. And I just stared at him, and I said, no, seriously, man, that was on TV. That was on the Ohio channel. Do you really think that? Or are we just spinning stuff for the media? And he just kept laughing. And so I just walked away. But this is really sick how we're race baiting. And I think something needs to be said about it. I know you really can't control what they say in hearings, but it would be great if we could do some fact checking.
Well, I tend to agree. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that gets said in hearings that deserves a fact check. And, there were a lot of narratives that we were also seeing in the Ohio debate that were just completely false, right? There were arguments that foreign national contributions are already illegal in ballot issues, and that is absolutely not false. There were accusations that it wasn't actually happening. But of course, we've traced the contributions from Wyss to 1630 to Ohio. And the whole idea of banning this is to ban direct and indirect. So you can't do this sort of money laundering game, the shell game of just passing money from one group to the next. So it was pretty astounding to watch so many different claims made, and such little interest in so much of the media in doing any kind of fact check.
Well, my favorite one. Oh, go ahead, Dave.
On this Wyss guy, who is this man? Right? I mean, usually there's another dark knight that we keep hearing about, but this guy is new to me. Who is he? And two, is he hiring?
Well, I can't speak to the last one, but so he is a Swiss national. He is a billionaire. He made his fortune in the medical device manufacturing space. There's actually a little bit of a more sordid history where some of the stuff that his company was producing was actually killing people. So there was some litigation associated with that. But the long story short is that he is a political progressive. He has had a lifelong kind of passion for influencing American politics, pushing it to the left. His a book that his own sister wrote about him said that his goal is to reinterpret the American Constitution through a progressive lens. And all the while, he doesn't feel the need to become a citizen. So he wants to influence our politics. He wants to turn us into a center left or a left country, but he doesn't actually think that he needs to become an American. And over the course of the last, particularly the last 8 years or so, he has funneled an enormous sum of money. In fact, he might be one of, if not the largest single political donors in the United States. But again, he's not an American citizen, and his money's going everywhere to environmental causes, promoting the Biden administration's agenda, and with so much of it landing in the politically active 1630 fund, that creates opportunities for that money to go everywhere, including ballot issues like we were just talking about.
Yeah. And I mean, by all means, Dave, if you want to go off to Switzerland anytime, brother, there's we'll that's kidding. So I do, Jason, with just a few minutes left here with you, and thanks again for taking the time here to unpack this again. I think this is one of these things. I just want to say to that end, maybe the most ridiculous argument I saw happening on this bill was this reporter Daryl Rowland, who's been around for a long time, and his whole argument was, well, yes, we know Hans is giving to 1630 Fund, and yes, we know 1630 Fund is spending money in Ohio elections, but we don't know if it's his money. There's a lot of money in there. It could be, and it's the absurd lines they draw. Again, I've used this again in sort of the Planned Parenthood taxpayer funding conversation of like, money is fungible, right? So that'd be like my wife and I sharing a bank account and me buying a big screen TV and her coming home and saying, "What did you do this?" I was like, "Well, I didn't use your money. I just used my money," even though it's all one account. Like it's the dumbest argument you'll ever see. But I want to jump just to a few other things here that Honest Elections Project is working on. One of the big concerns we had about, especially the 60% initiative not passing here in Ohio, is that it really becomes open season on our state constitution. And we're going to probably do a podcast on this in the near future on the proposed redistricting amendment here. That's really, again, just another shell game for sort of leftist politics. But the other one that's going around is ranked choice voting. And this is one more of those, things that the left brands and makes sounds really nice. And this is going to save America and save democracy and all these types of things. And generally speaking, if the left is saying it's going to save democracy, it likely is going to destroy the republic. But Jason, could you just talk about what ranked choice voting is and why we need to be really aware of this and concerned about what's coming with it, if it comes?
Yes. So ranked choice voting is a new issue. A lot of folks haven't heard about it, but it is coming for folks in Ohio and all across the country. It's being pushed by the left. It's their latest idea for how to remake voting for their own advantage. So, we all know the basic kind of American principle, one person, one vote. Well, ranked choice voting throws that out completely. And instead of voting for one person in a particular race, now you've got, say 5 people running, and you rank all of them in order of personal preference. And the whole shtick behind ranked choice voting is that elections ought to be won by political majority. So it's not about who gets the most votes. It's that you should have to get 50% plus one. And so they do this by gathering up all the ballots. And if no one gets over 50% of the first place vote, which happens fairly frequently, then you eliminate whatever candidate got the fewest first place votes and redistribute all the ballots that were cast to that candidate based on each individual voter's next highest selection. And then you rerun the numbers over and over and over again until you manufacture that majority. So it's this, again, it's sort of this shell game that they're playing with our elections. And you're converting the entire system into an algorithm-driven black box where you feed in the ballots, and then oftentimes the person who looks like they would have come in second or third place in a regular election becomes the winner. And what we see with this in practice is that ranked choice voting winds up, being a pull to the left. It's about pushing American politics further to the left. And the other thing that ranked choice voting does is weaken political parties, which a lot of people have plenty of beef with the various political parties. But by creating that power vacuum, guess who fills that? It's the massively well-funded donor class that are in many cases pumping tens of millions of dollars into ballot measures to push ranked choice voting. So you have a lot of liberal mega donors like John Arnold and others that are buying a new election system that will give them more control over our politics. And this is, as you mentioned, potentially coming to Ohio as soon as next year. This year alone, we're looking at ballot measures pushing ranked choice voting in Idaho, Montana, Nevada, Arizona, and so forth. So it's an active threat to free and fair elections, and we're working pretty hard to stop it.
So, Jason, I just got to say that this is where, especially from for Center for Christian Virtue, this is where worldview just really matters to understand a concept like this, because I think what the left ends up and the media ends up selling a lot of times is, hey, this system right now is really messed up, but we actually can build a perfect system where there will be no flaws and there will be peace and harmony and everybody will get along and we can all come to an agreement and all these types of things. I think for a lot of folks, they are frustrated with the two parties and they're frustrated with the governmental system and things like that. But the reality is we're talking about how do we get, in Ohio's case, 12 million people to agree on something. You're not going to get 12 million people. You're going to use there's not going to be a perfect system where everybody is happy with what the outcome is. But what the founders of the country and the framers of Ohio in particular did is they put together what I think is one of the best things going for making these decisions. And again, if you understand that people are sinful and fallen, and until Christ returns and every knee is bowing and tongue is confessing that Jesus is King, we're not going to have peace and harmony, and we're going to have systems that are not quite perfect, but work pretty well. And that's the reality. I think with the two-party system is, don't get me wrong, whenever David steps out of line at CCV, we make him go speak at a Republican event as a demerit. That's the
This is true. This is actually a true statement.
But we have issues with both parties, but to say that whenever somebody comes around and is promising, oh, this is the thing that's going to make everybody happy and everything fixed, it's probably a good sign that no, they're not being honest with you, and it's probably going to make things worse and tends to, like you said, empower particularly the wealthy.
Yeah, that's right. And even setting aside, whether you're on the left or the right, maybe you think pulling politics to the left is a good idea. Ranked choice voting complicates elections, and it makes it harder to vote, and it makes it harder to understand the results of elections. And what we've seen in places that have used it is that you actually wind up with fewer people voting. And that is a huge problem, particularly if you care about ensuring that people can and do participate in our democratic process. Because to your point, trying to get, 12 million people in one state, much less, 300 million in a nation, figure out a way to resolve their differences and come together and have a legitimate government. You have to have people engaged. You have to have people participating, and you have to give people confidence that they can trust the results of elections. So we really, really are at this moment in American history where we should be doing everything we can to inspire confidence. And I think you get that through transparency and accountability and laws that secure voting while also guaranteeing access to everyone that wants to participate. Ranked choice voting throws all that out and basically says, just trust us. It'll all work out in the end. And that, I think, is a really, really risky proposition. And it's not one that in practice has played out anywhere that's tried it.
So for our listeners, we do have a bill in the Senate regarding this, and it would actually be to ban ranked choice voting in the state of Ohio. It was sponsored by a Republican, Gavarone, and a Democrat, Demora. So keep an eye on that. Hasn't really been moving since last fall. It's in general government, but if you wanted to track it, you can go to legislature.ohio.gov and just click on that bill. It's Senate Bill 137. And they'll keep you abreast of any movement on that bill.
And Jason, for folks that want to get connected with the Honest Elections Project, I got to tell you, we got to have you back out, or maybe even have you out for our summit coming up this fall, because we want to talk about secure elections. And I know for a lot of folks, there's so much more to unpack here with the election coming. Because again, like you said, in order for us to have a nation, we need to have elections that people can trust. But how can folks go about connecting with you and accessing the resources you guys have?
So we've got a great website, honestelections.org, and we're very active on. I still call it Twitter, but I guess I got to call it X now, at Honest Elections, and Facebook as well with the same handle. So I encourage folks to follow us and check us out. We've got a lot of irons in the fire, and with about 5 months left between now and Election Day, I'm sure there's going to be a lot going on all over the country. So I appreciate the time to join you guys on the podcast today.
Yeah, and again, it's not surprising that Heritage wanted to protect elections, and so they brought in an Ohioan. I mean, it just is. It's what we do. So, hey, I appreciate it. Jason, have a great one, and we'll catch you next time here on The Narrative.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Narrative, presented by CCV and produced by Wessler Media. If you found today's episode insightful, leave us a review or rating and subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. We're your hosts, Mike Andrews, Aaron Baer, and David Mahan, and we'll see you next time on The Narrative.